What's up, guys? Welcome to episode 62 of the Kind of Funny Gamescast. As always, I'm Tim Gettys. We're only 7 away from the only episode that'll ever matter.
69.
Joined by the coolest dudes in video games, Colin Moriarty and Greg Miller.
Hello.
Good to be here with you today. No clapping.
I just felt like clapping for you.
No,
You deserve it, Colin.
No.
You've been working hard. You deserve a little clap.
For Colin.
Thank you, Colin Moriarty. And
All
for the
right,
first
standing
time,
ovations.
for the first time in a long time, IGN Zone, Vincent Janito.
Oh,
you guys.
Your Twitter threw me for a loop today. I was trying to find it to tweet about it, and I'm like, all right. So I remember it was Vincognito,
Right.
But then I'm like, I wrote that in, and I'm like, wait a minute, no, it's your neat. There's
Yes.
the neat in there.
Yes,
You
yeah.
had like 3 things going
know,
on.
it's
There's
like a
the
triple play
your
on
name,
words.
the
Yep.
incognito, and the neat all in
Yep.
one. Cool.
Yep.
You did it.
I did it.
So that's fun.
I explained to Sean Finnegan, who's a video producer.
He's a punk ass bitch is what it is. Heard he likes hiking. Yeah, Kevin agrees.
Yeah.
Right, Kevin?
You guys remember Sean Finnegan?
Oh, yeah.
course.
Good dude. And I was explaining to him the origin of that name. I originally had this horrible Twitter handle that was just may as well have been a random amalgamation of letters and dashes and things.
I vaguely remember that.
Yeah, and when I came on, Andrew Goldfarb, who's now our executive editor of news, was like, Vince, you gotta do something about
gotta
that.
change that shit.
So I borrowed from these people made a hate video about me when I did a Mugen Souls review when I was a freelancer, and they hated me because I gave it a low score. So they did this like half-hour long hate video, and towards the end, I think unironically, I don't think it was meant to be funny. They were like serious and angry. They were like, Vincent Janito, you're not Nito at all. And I thought it was maybe the funniest thing I'd ever heard anyone say about me. So I was like, okay, I'm going to take that.
I'm running with it.
And I'm going to run with it. So
I'm going to take their bullshit and turn it into gold.
Let me be the first to say, thank God we live in the day and age now where you review a game low, you don't get any shit for it.
Bro,
You know what I mean?
absolutely.
It's such a better internet.
we will get to
Those
that.
were
That's going
rough
to be
days.
topic 2 of the day.
Yeah, okay.
Ladies and gentlemen, for those that don't know, here is the rigmarole of the Kind of Funny Gamescast. Every week we sit around a table, not this table. Usually it's a different table because right now we're in Patreon.
Thank you, Patreon.
The spaceship of Patreon. We're here.
That
Thanks,
was our
Colin.
life support system.
Yeah, oh my God. Every week we talk about video games and all the things that we love. It's broken up topic by topic, Monday through Thursday over at youtube.com/kindoffunnygames. And then on Friday, you get the full episode for free on iTunes and podcast services, all that stuff. But if you want it early, you can go to patreon.com/kindoffunnygames, pay $1, and you get exclusive episodes. You pay $5, you get this show early in audio form. You pay $10, you get it in video, and then there's a whole bunch of other stuff on top of that. Whoa. So that's cool. That's the most detail we've ever given.
I know, you've given a lot of detail. I like that. You're selling these Twitch kids.
Oh, yeah. Get sold. Topic 1 of the day is PlayStation VR. We've had a lot of false starts talking about this in the last couple days. We recorded a whole reacts video.
Right.
And then the audio was messed up, so we couldn't put it up.
Right.
Then we talked about it a little bit throughout the day.
We opened up
different
the
things.
day 1 stream here from
Yeah.
Patreon on our GDC thing talking about it, but we were exhausted.
And it felt weird. It
nonsensical.
felt like we were just kind of like trying to not copy exactly what we said the
Sure.
last time, which I don't know. Maybe that's just me. I just think about weird things.
I just say the same thing over and over again.
We now have Vince, and he is
Hi.
obviously the #1 VR knowledge base.
Obviously.
Clearly.
Yeah. So
I'm the only person.
So what do you guys think about this? We got some big news. PlayStation VR, $399 US.
Yes.
October 2016.
Yes.
Cinematic mode was announced.
Yes.
What's in the box was announced.
Yes.
A lot of stuff. Not a PlayStation Move.
No.
Not a camera.
Not a camera.
Those
No.
things you need. The internet's mad about this. I'm sure we'll get to that, and Colin will tell everyone why they're dumb. And yeah,
That's what Colin does.
let's start off.
The first thing I want to talk about PlayStation VR is how surprising to me the reaction to it was. So until they talked about the price and release date and all that, everyone has been mostly kind of cautiously optimistic about it. At least in my circles, it's always been like, oh, like, you know, maybe it's not going to be quite as powerful as the Oculus or the Vive, but you know, like, hey, it'll probably be less expensive. It'll maybe be more consumer, you know, facing, and like, yeah, it seems pretty cool. Everyone's like, you know, kind of low key about it. And then they announced the price and the date, and everyone's like, it's ridiculous that Sony thinks this idea could possibly work. I'm like, wait a minute, guys. We just spent like the last 2 years being like, this seems pretty cool. This is interesting. It works pretty well. I hope they succeed with it. And then the moment, and they beat their nearest competitor by $200, and everyone's like, this is ridiculous. Sony is committing suicide. And I'm like, it just seems like a very sudden shift in the conversation just over an announcement that, quite frankly, was pretty predictable.
Now it's real. Yeah. Now people have something to really talk about. It was kind of like Trump, where it was like, for a long time, nobody cares. And now it's real, and you have to address it and say something about it. It's interesting you say that. I mean, granted, we talk to each other about it, and then the audience. And I feel like our audience has been excited about it. You know what I mean?
That's great to hear.
And now I feel like it's almost unbridled excitement, because now it's like, it's not $800. It is affordable.
That's how I feel, and I can't believe there's so much of my Twitter feed and just so much of the articles that I'm seeing out there are just like these doom and gloom, what is Sony doing articles. And I'm just like,
You saw those Amazon pre-orders though for the UK, right? That it sold out in like 10 minutes. The stock Amazon UK had.
This is when they announced the price of the Oculus. I was like, interesting, good to know. All Sony has to do is come in $100 under that, and consumer VR is theirs. Like that's it. Like they already have an installed base of machines that people will know will work with it, and they've got a price that's, once anyone sees VR anything, they're not going to care about the name or like which brand it is or whether it's more advanced than the other one. It's like people are like, oh, but the Vive is the clearly more advanced machine. I'm like, what by even trying to tell average Joe who doesn't know much about VR or who just thinks it's a cool experience when they see it at Jimmy's house or whatever, like you're trying to tell them, oh, well, this PlayStation VR looks pretty cool to you, but let me tell you about this Vive and why it's so much more advanced. You're trying to tell someone who rides a motor scooter to work every day how much better your teleporter is than the next guy's teleporter. Like they have literally no like basis for comparison.
No frame of reference.
They have no frame of reference to understand why like the Vive is supposedly so much better. So it's like all that's going to matter once the first time someone goes to someone's house and sees it and experiences it, they're going to go, how can I get that in my house for the least amount of money? And especially if they already have a PS4 in their living room, the answer is clearly going to be PlayStation VR.
I want to go to Jimmy's house. He sounds like he has
Jimmy's
a lot of
the best.
Jimmy's my dude.
Yeah.
Jimmy, my dude.
Jimmy's good. I was the neighborhood Jimmy in my. Wow, that sounded horrible.
Yeah.
I was that guy in my neighborhood. But anyway, let's move past that.
Okay.
Price point's great. Totally reasonable. People are being babies about Move. People are being babies about the camera, because these are so-called hidden costs. But the hidden cost, as I've said, of running Oculus is a $2,000 computer. So like you are like the price point of a PS4, the camera and the VR unit, which is all you actually need. You don't need Move controllers. Is going to be around $800. And that's way more reasonable than its competitors, no matter how much their devices, and no matter how much. Vive could be free and PSVR is still more affordable because you still need a great computer to run it. And so I don't really quite understand the complaints about it. I think the price point's appropriate.
Thank you, intern.
And I find that my personal take on it is that, we talked to Lauren Lanning about it this morning, and he had a lot of interesting insight into the pipeline and to like the reason that like Sony, because he predicted at E3, and I thought it was quite counterintuitive at the time that Sony would be the most likely to capitalize on VR. And I was like, that seems ridiculous to me because, Facebook has so much more money and so much more loose capital to invest in Oculus, and there's going to be other competitors. But what his point was, and I think it's well taken, is that, well, Facebook doesn't have a retail structure. Facebook doesn't have 20-something years of relationships. Mm-hmm. Facebook doesn't have the PlayStation Network. Facebook doesn't have like all of these different things. So, or their own device, or their own box.
And that's
so,
the most important thing. Yeah.
Yeah. So, do I think VR is going to succeed wildly at market for anyone in the early years? No. I just think that Sony's well positioned to be the most likely to reap the most rewards. And I will say, as people have pointed out, that they're selling it and they're making a profit at $400, which is fucking unbelievable.
That is
like
unbelievable.
when I heard that, I was like, they are eating it so hard on this price. Like I assume they were eating like literally $150 a unit or something like that.
Because that's what Sony does. That's what Sony does.
Yeah, they've done it with almost everything. Like PS4 is profitable now. I mean, PS3, they wanted it to be profitable. It wasn't. So like, the fact that they're selling PSVR at $399 with all of this advanced technology, it might not be as powerful as Vive. I don't really care. Like you said, like it doesn't matter. It's like the whole NES Master System, Genesis, Super Nintendo argument. No one cared. Yep. So, or even like the PS2, Xbox, GameCube argument. Like clearly, no one cared.
No one cared, and believe me, as a GameStop employee, it was EB Games back then, but like as an employee, like I even tried to tell people about the power difference. I was like, why would you ever buy Madden on the PS2 if you have an Xbox? People were like,
Yeah, like
That's
what I got.
It's what I got.
It's just like these things to the end user, 99% of the end users, I would even say,
matter.
they don't care. So the fact that they're selling PSVR on a system that is proliferating more widely than PS2 over, when you overlay those charts
Life
over
to
each
date,
other, life
yeah,
to date, when they are marketing this thing at a price point $200 cheaper than their nearest, most vocal competitor, when they're selling it at a profit, so they have a market reason beyond just saturation, but they're actually going to make money when they sell them. So it's not one of those things where they're going to be like, well, like, we have this thing and it's a sunken cost for us, and so we need to sell it. It's like, no, like we have sunk costs and we can make them back quickly. We don't have to wait for the back end. Like we don't have to wait 5 years to get the software sales to make VR profitable. It's profitable right now. I think that's pretty substantial stuff. And so
I think setting their bar at the appropriate level changes everything for them. You know what I mean? In terms of we always talk about it, I don't want it to become the PlayStation Move again, right? And I think that even if you have a weak launch lineup here, but you sell through these units the way that people are talking about buying them and the way this Amazon thing went overnight, I think that you suddenly have it where, okay, I'm invested in this technology and I'm interested in this technology and I'm going to go. And I think the sunken cost that people want to argue about here or there, it works this way a little bit for the Vive and Oculus as well, but for PlayStation, right? I think the sunken cost already talks about you're already almost there. Well, I already own the system,
Sure.
and I'm such a hardcore gamer or hardcore PlayStation user, or whatever you want to call me, core gamer, core PlayStation user, that I bought the camera because I wanted to Twitch stream, and I haven't used it for a lot of things. Like, you have these things maybe already in your house, so suddenly it is like, well, yeah, I literally just need $400 for the unit instead of it being, my computer. I don't need the full 2,000. I have a rig, but I do need a better graphics card. I do need a better this.
Yeah, well, I think it's even more streamlined and simpler than that. Let's say you have a computer that runs. That's great. It's like our tower. Like we have a great tower that we run the show on. That can run Oculus pretty easily. Oculus, if so, you're like, I'm interested in VR. I have everything I need. I have a PS4 and I have a great rig, right? Even if I need a camera and 2 PlayStation Move controllers and PSVR, it is still cheaper than buying an Oculus. And like that's why the arguments about like,
I just don't even think it's the same audience, though. Like, I
well,
don't.
no,
think
it's not the same audience, but it doesn't matter. Well, there is going to be like a Venn diagram crossover of those two audiences, but that doesn't matter. I was talking more with Vince's argument about being like, what is Sony thinking with the price and blah blah blah, and the camera bundle, and I'm like,
it's not somewhat. I think that's a separate argument than even bringing the Oculus and the Rift or the Vive into it, because it's like the people that are upset about the price they're just upset about the price for the PlayStation. That's the one they're interested in because they have a PlayStation and they're trying to do this. They're not the people with the rigs and trying to do the computer thing. They want the PlayStation experience, and that $400 is a lot of money for that.
Oh, definitely. Like, let's not. I mean, let me not be misunderstood. Like, I'm not saying $400. If you don't have $400, you're a peasant. I don't have $400. I still don't. I haven't. I'm gonna have to start saving now for my PlayStation VR. So, like, I'm not saying a $400.
I'm gonna buy 1,000 of them.
Jesus,
Patreon money. Yes.
You thought you were getting an animated series? Fuck you.
Colin's getting hella views. It's interesting for me because you're talking about how your circles are all like, oh my God, and like upset about it, whereas Greg's talking about our circles being way more like, yeah. It was weird for me. We were at the PSVR the press conference, and when the price went up, like my first gut reaction was, and everyone around me standing up clapping, and I'm like, this is fucking weird.
It's a weird thing for journalists to do.
We didn't stand up.
there was one dude that stood up.
That's
don't know
fine.
who he is.
You said everybody.
It's
His name was Shuhei Yoshida.
I don't know. I thought. I mean, the price is amazing. Like I stand by that 100%. Like the
when they started talking about Oculus and Vive prices, Colin and I had to have that come to Jesus moment of like, do we not know anything?
Yeah, like, well, that was what we talked about. That's what we talked about on PS I Love You, where we're like, could they do it for $249? Could they do it for $299? And then like Oculus is like $599, and Vive's like what, $800 or something like that?
$800. Yeah.
And it's like, and we've used them both, and they're great. But like, I was like, we did have the thing where I'm like, I don't think we have any idea what the fuck we're talking about. Like this PSVR might be $1,000 for all I know. Like now, like, but they were more in line. We actually predicted it on PS I Love You right before the thing where we're like, I was like, best case scenario $299, probably $399, worst case scenario $499,
yeah.
and that they're right in that sweet spot. Optically, I think it's going to be good because this reminds me of the inverse of the Vita pricing. So follow me on this one for a minute. When Vita was revealed as NGP. We didn't know anything about it. Everyone's like, what the fuck are they doing? And then like when the Vita came out, so there was not a lot of excitement except for like with us.
Right.
Everyone's like,
Trophies on the go? Fuck yeah.
Everyone's like, what is NGP? Who cares? But when Morpheus was revealed, everyone's like, this is cool. Like, this is very interesting. So there was already an opposite relationship there. When Vita was revealed with its price and stuff, everyone was like, holy shit. And there's a lot of revisionist history out there that everyone forgets. But go back and look at the news from 2011 where everyone's like, oh my God, this is awesome.
Yeah, people were like,
$250.
it's so cheap.
It's so cheap and it's so awesome. And we finally played it and it's great and all. And I'll never forget that as long as I live. It looked like the Vita was going to sell 100 million units the way everyone was talking about it.
I thought it was going to end the world.
I did too. Everyone reminds me. And then, so there was excitement, and then the Vita came out and it just thudded, right?
Well, because at the very end, they're like, memory cards.
Right. So with PSVR, they've gotten ahead of it, right? They were like, okay, here's everything in the box. Notice there's no camera, Notice there's no PlayStation Move controller, which you do not need. And then like all of these kinds of things, and then everyone's like lukewarm about it. So like with these like inverse relationships with each other, I'm wondering is when it comes out, everyone's going to be pleasantly surprised, as opposed to the whole Vita thing where everyone had these expectations and then they were destroyed in October of 2011 and November of 2011 when everyone's like, oh, the memory cards suck and these games don't even run online and what the fuck is Nier and like the 3G doesn't work and all this kind of stuff. And I was like, all right, like so I guess what I'm saying is like I'm kind of trying to pay attention to the way people are doing this now because it is the exact opposite. Beat for beat of Vita, which has been a commercial failure. So
this one feels like, I feel like you both from the press and the audience, the expectation seems to be set at the appropriate level of like, this is tip of the sword stuff. And we went and played all these demos, right? And it's like, there was 2 real games there and the rest were like cool things that maybe will be nice and you know what I mean?
Which are the 2 real ones you played?
I think, well, I guess from the event, we were talking about Rush of Blood.
Until Dawn, Rush of Blood, and Eve Valkyrie.
And then I think Riggs is in there too. I want to play more Riggs, but I'm saying like those all like you can play them and be like, this is a full-fledged game. What are you going to talk about?
The hype, the super hype, the killer, to me, the true killer app that's going to sell it to like, kind of like the mom and pop who like don't know that this is cool yet.
Yeah.
Like I guess the Wii Sports or the Wii Bowling of PlayStation VR is going to be Super Hypercube.
Oh yeah?
100%.
Okay.
Yeah,
is that the N64 Tetris?
Take the 5 seconds of fun that is Tetris, where you're like, here's a block, where do I put it?
Yeah,
and just blow that out into like an entire experience.
I've played this one before.
That's like super just atmospheric and absorbing. So the idea is this: you are situated behind a block that is traveling forward towards a wall. The wall has a shape in it, and the idea is that this block, you have to rotate it so that the shape that it is, putting forth will fit through that hole. So you start out just a cube, so it's easy, like, oh, cube, square. But then as you pass through walls, they add more pieces onto it, and it becomes this complex, ungainly, crazy shape that you then have to start rotating and manipulating so that it will fit through the differently shaped holes that are being shown in the wall.
And you can be looking at it from one side, and it does still look like a cube, and then you rotate it, and it turns out it's super long, and it's got these like tendrils you didn't know about, and then you have to try to flip it.
And the whole idea is that as the block gets bigger, it becomes harder and harder to see the wall, and it also becomes harder and harder, since you're only looking at one side of it at a time, to know what it is in 3 dimensions. So what you start doing is you start looking around the block. You start, looking past you rotate the block a little bit, then you look past it so you can see the shape of the wall, and then you have to duck back behind the block and start manipulating it again to try to line it up. And it just take that fun of Tetris where you're like, I've got to fit this peg into this hole, and then it just makes that this like rewarding fast loop that's super atmospheric, and like every time you get the peg in the hole the right way, like it's just like there's this subtle magic, it's like that old Nintendo design magic of making a simple thing like breaking a block into like 4 pieces, like that sound effect and the way it feels. They just nail that so hard that every time you figure it out and get past the next wall, you feel like invigorated and kind of like pumped up. It's a mixture of sound design and the way it looks and the way it feels in VR. It's also super smart because they modeled. It's played on the PlayStation controller, but they actually model the DualShock 4 in like a Tron neon like outlined version in the game, and the PlayStation camera tracks it. You're not doing motion controls, it's all traditional controls, but even if you happen to move it around, like the game tracks that. So when you're looking in, when you're in this world, you're also seeing what you're holding in that world, which kind of like cements it. Like I am floating through space with these geometrical shapes rather. It sounds hard to wrap your head around.
But when you play it, it's awesome. No,
when you
that's
play
the
it,
thing.
it's like you get it instantly, and you just feel like you're out in space playing Tetris. And like VR Tetris in space, I cannot imagine the gamer disengaged enough or casual enough, the person who like dislikes games enough to not, because Tetris, I don't know what you guys remember, but like
Dude,
my aunt played Tetris, my grandmother played Tetris,
Kevin's
my
mom
mom played
loves Tetris.
Exactly, that's what I'm saying. So it's like when like my mom plays that for the first time, that's it. She's never coming back to reality.
Sure.
It's never gonna
When
happen.
VR
you put it on her for
it
res.
clicks. And I think that's the biggest selling point, that like all this, the price, if you have the money and you experience that clicking moment, the money almost doesn't even matter. It's just like, this is cool and worth it. It's then the question of how many of those clicking experiences are going to come. And it's cool that, we're talking about the games that we see are real games, but then there's all these other things that are experiences. And I don't think that's bad. I think that we need a lot of those experiences. And I think that PlayStation, it's definitely the more mainstream and accessible way to access them. Because if you're going to get one of the PC ones, you're going to be able to find all the weird indie things that the kids at home are making these experiences, and they're crazy. You can do that nowadays with just PC anything, right? PCs have everything available. PlayStation's going to hone in on, here are finely tuned, fully, nicely like just polished experiences. And I think that that's cool. And even walking around the demo room we were yesterday, was it yesterday? 2 days ago.
GDC's a blur.
There's a whole bunch of different things, and you look at one thing, you're a seagull. You look at one thing, you're a golem. You look at like, there's all these different like stuff that's just like, man, that's really crazy.
I mean, these are cool, but like, I do disagree that like it's cool to have those as supplemental things, but for VR to succeed in the game space, it is going to need Valkyrie type games. It is going to need lots of those. It's going to need a lot of Ace Combat type games. It might.
It won't.
It might. I mean, it depends on like. The one question I have with this is, what is the metric of success in terms of Sony really trying to subsidize big games and really trying to use its first parties to get games? Because as we were talking about yesterday with Gareth from Gorilla Cambridge,
Right.
Sony has one of their studios working on a VR game. So to me, it's like Sony, Japan studio is working on games too, but they're working on a shit ton of things. They're like the Sony Santa Monica over there, where they have their their hands in a lot of different
pies,
a lot of different pies, a lot of different cookie jars. But like as far as like one studio working on one game, like Gorilla Cambridge is the only one, and I'm like, so do you guys have like a pot of money that you want to give to second parties or third parties? Because they must know that the salvation of this is going to be getting those big games, and they're going to have to pay for them. And since PSVR is profitable, and since their studios are certainly inclined not to make these games because I think they have the choice, I wonder if they're going to be stuck in some sort of like kind of phantom zone where they're like, well, the thing works and it's great, but it's the same thing with Vita, but it's going to be even more pronounced because this is such a, as Lauren was saying this morning, this is such a paradigm shifting, game changing kind of way of playing games. But I will reiterate too, is the point I've made many times, is that like I hope we get to a place in 10 years where it's like, who gives a fuck about the games on VR? Like, look at all of the cool shit that it can do.
I mean, that's kind of what I'm saying even now with the experiences and stuff. I think that is the selling point. The games are the extra, like the game actually works and the game's cool. There is real games on this. That's all extra. It's the experience stuff that is really gonna sell it.
It's it'll keep you engaged. It's what Lauren was talking about today, that there's gonna be different experiences to bop around. I think this is what I'm back to when I'm talking about expectations. I don't think you can be an informed consumer interested in PlayStation VR right now and be looking at it and expecting that you are going to get there's 50 games coming by the end of the year, right? October to the end of the year for this game. You can't expect that of those, 25 of them are going to be 15-hour experiences that I put this on. No, it's going to be, I'm going to rotate the cube for a while, then I'm going to go play a couple Valkyrie things, then I'm going to go see this Gary the Gull, fuck around with that, jump out.
But the other thing that I think is really cool is that there was one game, I don't remember what it was called, but it was that the social one that she was talking about.
Yeah. We went over there and you're like, it's like the chat room where you're talking and throwing snowballs at each other.
And what's cool about that is you just get these like kind of just like me-esque avatars that are in this 3D world that you're just walking around, and then you can talk to people from all around the world, but you're experiencing them in a 3D space, so it feels like they're in the room with you. And it's like, that's the level of VR shit where it's like, is that a game? No, who cares really? It doesn't really matter. It's just, it's like Ventrilo or any of those, the VoIP stuff. But instead of talking to your friends on a phone or whatever, or on the chat room, you can talk to them and it's 3D audio. So when they move around you, you get lost in that actual virtual reality. And I think those experiences are what are really going to push this thing. And it's like, oh, take that. And that's lame to people like us. Like, we don't really care about that. But how do you apply that into what games can be?
Sure.
Or what other experiences can be, and just kind of go from there. Because I'm in such a weird place where this is the Move. This is not going to do anything that the Move didn't. Like, it's going to have a couple games, and when it works awesome. Then there's everything else.
But this is my whole thing. I think Move and Vita we've been talking about a lot compared to PlayStation VR, but I feel like it's been shifted, right? If we're, I don't know why I'm putting them in a triangle, but it's been shifted in terms of they're in front of
motions there, which I appreciate.
They're in front of the
Like a
messaging.
magician.
They're in front of the messaging this time. It is not the Vita is coming out and you're getting all these AAA console games on the go, and it's not Move where this is gonna this changes everything.
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 Remember those?
I don't know.
I don't think. Oh, at E3 one year they had all these Kevin Butler things, and it was this changes everything. But then the T was like replaced with.
Gotcha.
So if you read it literally, it was just everything.
Yeah.
I think they're in front of the messaging of, I don't think you're buying it expecting those experiences. You're not buying it expecting Move games are going to be 1-for-1 sword fighting. You're not buying it expecting you're going to be playing Uncharted and Infamous and God of War all on your Vita. You're buying this understanding that you are buying into the building block of what, as Shu always tells us when we talk to him, the next 20 years of PlayStation. And this is wave one.
And something that I also think that people are underestimating about VR in general, and like one of the reasons why I kind of disagree with you a little bit, Tim, is because the idea of VR has been this vaunted pie in the sky idea in like science fiction and our kind of subconscious desires of what technology can be for so long. It seems like it's so out there that we're like, yeah, this is a total game changer and it's going to shift everything. And so everything needs to be built from the ground up for it. And what's that look like? Well, it looks like experiences, right? Like, but what people are kind of forgetting, I think, is that for a very large and viable number of genres, VR can literally just be a third axis of control. Like anything where you're sitting in a cockpit of anything, that level of abstraction between what you're seeing and what you're doing already exists. So like, for instance, like I played a demo of Drive Club retrofitted to work with the PlayStation VR. I usually never play racing games in the cockpit mode. I lose too much situational awareness. I play zoomed out because that's just what I do. Here, in Drive Club on PlayStation VR, the demo that they showed me, I was in the cockpit mode and I felt like I was more aware. And did it change the way I played the game? No, it didn't. It's literally a game that exists already. And they just supported like camera looking with the PlayStation VR. And now I'm driving, and then when I'm in the middle of a turn and I'm instinctively thinking to myself, how much deeper or longer does this turn get? I can literally just do this while steering and not only is that immersive, but that actually makes my gameplay experience better. And that's an existing model, right? Driving games are things that exist and that we make and that sell.
And Polyphony's doing the same thing.
Exactly, with Gran Turismo Sport. So, I guess my point is there's other things, like Riggs is a great example of like a mech combat game. Again, that abstraction already exists. I'm a guy inside of a mech. So where I aim to shoot and where how I move is a different thing from where I look, except in Riggs it's not. They actually do aiming by sight, which I don't think is a good idea. But Hawken,
when they were over here talking about it, there's a mode they use and they think professional players are going to, or professional, you know what I mean? People who are super into it are going to use where moving your head turns to everything. Oh, good. And I was like, that was the most hard thing for me to wrap my head around playing it. I would have loved to have had that.
Because and this is the thing. These kinds of games, like a third-person team-based combat game that just, so they make the concession, you're in a mech so that you can have the whole, I'm the pilot and I'm looking somewhere while I'm shooting. Like, that's another thing that already exists. Flight games like Ace Combat or Eve Valkyrie.
God,
those are genres that already exist. We already have, like, I guess the answer to the question is, how are we going to get Sony or any other company to want to pay for making a game for the PlayStation VR? There's genres that they're already making that will be demonstrably better to play in VR, and I think that's going to carry a lot of it.
Well, I think the bigger thing about, because you're talking about like Move was not a failure for Sony commercially because they made money on it, but it is this thing that didn't proliferate. But what we're losing sight of, and it's one of the things we talked about, and I think this is the most important piece, is that when we talk about the Wiimote or the PlayStation Move, and if you talk to Sony, they might claim that PlayStation Move was, in development concurrent to the Wii, and they didn't really know. I don't know if that's true or not, but
I bet it was.
But
Richard Marks don't lie.
The Move was like a much better device than the Wiimote, and it didn't matter because it did much more because the Waggle or like that kind of motion control had only gaming applications. And I want to reiterate that VR, if we're keeping our minds very small and very limited, if we look at this as being nothing more than the test bed for what VR can really do, which has nothing to do with games. And it doesn't happen very often, or really almost ever, where video games are the proof that something works. You know what I mean? When the personal computer came out, it wasn't until really years later, Apple I, Apple II, when Apple II really started getting going, games were one of the things that helped prove it, but it was really like more, office things, like spreadsheets were really big and all those kinds of things. The biggest selling software in the mid to late 70s and into the 80s when IBM PC came out was like, look what you can do in the office. It was like the games were like an ancillary kind of thing. Even something like the original video game Tennis for Two in 1959 on an oscilloscope. Well, oscilloscopes existed as radar devices and all these kinds of things. But when we look at VR, it's like the first way we're going to get it out there is with games. It's just the proof of concept. So Waggle has no use outside of video games, but VR has every use for everything you can possibly imagine. And I want people to like think bigger about, not necessarily with PSVR, Oculus, but like in 20 or 30 years, what can we do? And I was talking to someone about what if you had a 360 degree, really complex camera at your parents' house, and your mom calls you up, right? And you put on the headset and you're catching up with the family and you're there.
And by the way, those 360-degree cameras are going to be cheaper faster than you think.
Yeah, of course, just like every other piece of
technology. Based on everything that we know right now, like those will be affordable, I think, for the average consumer in the next 2 or 3 years.
I just think that like we have to look at things as bigger and more vast in games. I think the future, the next 20 years of PlayStation might have little to do with games in the VR space compared to like all of the practical applications of like Lauren was saying, like what if you can go to a concert?
Right.
What if you could, like I've been saying, like what if NASA, when they go to Mars or SpaceX goes to Mars and they're like, we're bringing all this complicated shit with us so you can put on your VR headset and just be there. Like that's way cooler than any video game because it's like that, like, so like I'm excited about that. And the other thing about like the AAA, there's going to be a dearth of AAA games available. There's no doubt about that. The solution, and I'm interested in this, and I'm interested in how this might work with the processing power of the PS4 and also the workflow of the studios is, what if when Far Cry 5 came out, they were like, here's the $60 game. It runs on your PS4 and your Xbox One. It really only matters with PS4 for PSVR. And you can play it as is. And you can download this $20 or $40 attachment to it. And like this will let it run on VR. Like, in other words, like give the studios a way to like make a little bit of extra scratch because it's way more complicated. The game has to run at 120 frames a second. It has to like be rendered twice. It has to be like things that are like really hard to do. Give them like a little bit of like financial incentive to be like, can we take the $60 game and make it a $100 game and run it on VR? And would that be worth it to people? I don't know. I'm just trying to figure out like and kind of brainstorm solutions to the AAA problem, because there will be a AAA problem if the game will only run on VR. But what if like it could run on everything outside of this theater mode, which I think is like not the answer. Like what if you could just download the next Killzone and it's like, well, it's $60 on PS4 and it's $100 on PSVR but
it seems like everybody who's talked to us about that has said it can't do that, right?
Well,
like,
it can't do that as it is, because you'd have to like you
have to do things in 3D.
Yeah, and you have to do and the HUDs and all that kind of stuff like can't exist in a flat plane and all that kind of stuff. That's what I'm saying. Like it would basically be like developing the game twice. Yeah. But like maybe the core of the game's already there, so it only costs them 25% as much, and they make their money back. I'm just trying to brainstorm solutions that
hear you. I feel like that's where we get into like BioShock's Move integration though, right? Where it's like, all right, cool. It's not the whole game. It's this gallery or whatever, which could be cool as we talk, as we're literally talking, we talked to Mike Bithla today, who's putting out Volume Coda, which is a free add-on to it. And there you go. You know what I mean? Like this is him taking an existing game, adding in a bonus to do it. We're killing Vince. Vince is dying.
Dude, VR is so exciting.
It is so exciting.
This is like, and so is motion gaming.
Oh my god! It's not even on the same.
I'm not saying that they're the same thing, but I'm saying the way people are talking about this is literally the exact same way people are talking about motion gaming. It's going to be so cool when this happens. It's going to be so cool when that happens. Yeah, it will. It's not going to happen.
Well, what was the, like? I mean, maybe I'm just not remembering. I was in college and it was a very fuzzy time for me. But when we came out, what was anyone talking about outside of gaming that motion control can do?
No, but I mean, I'm not even talking about outside gaming. I'm even talking about just gaming.
No, I know, but that's what I'm saying is like that's the fundamental core is like big minds, and none of which are like at this table, because you need like a Lauren Landing type mind to really wrap your head around this, or a Cliffy B, or like someone that like sees, like and understand shit that we just don't understand. A Steve Gaynor, someone like that, but like. When you see a fucking Wiimote, it's like, this is what it does. You do that, and it didn't even like live up to its promise of like, one-to-one sword fighting or anything like that. But when you see the VR unit, my mind leaves games almost immediately. And I think that's the excite.
I think
this changes
everything. I keep talking about the clicking moment, and I feel like with the motion control, when it worked, the 1 out of 5 times it worked, it's like, oh shit, I'm actually doing this. I can pull an arrow back and do this thing. That's crazy. And then you're like, oh, now I'm out of the field of how they want me to play, so it's fucked. And VR, I've had that exact same experience every single time. When it works, it's fucking magical and awesome. And that's why I'm in the weirdest place with this, where it's like, I want this thing. Like I do. I think I'm gonna buy one. I'm still on the fence, but it's like I want it, and I want it to be good. But it's like it's not this crazy thing that's like all this stuff you're talking about it's cool when this happens and this happens. Like, man, we're so far from that. It sucks that like the great minds, they need to be on it right now doing this shit because it's not worth the 400.
Some of them are, and they're gonna need the proof of concept, and it's going to take boldness, and it's going to take risk taking, and all the things that market capitalism encourages, and then either ruins you or makes you. I just think that VR is permanent. It's not going anywhere. In 50 years, it's going to be ubiquitous. I think that AR is another thing. I mean, augmented reality might even be more important depending on how people play with it and what they do with it in terms of like having your own heads-up display and stuff like that, like as you're walking around, very Google Glass kind of thing, or whatever. So I don't know. I just see this as like so exciting because this is a technological branch that as Vince was saying, is finally being realized. And people have been talking about VR for decades and been messing around with it for decades, and in sci-fi for almost 100 years. Mm-hmm. So it's amazing. Like, it's just so funny. Like, we live in an age where like Isaac Asimov and all these guys talk about, or Ray Bradbury writing about, or whoever writing about rogue AI. And now like Bill Gates and all these great minds are being like, rogue AI is like probably going to happen. And it's probably, and now Orson Scott Card and all these guys are writing about virtual reality, basically, and all these kinds of things. And now it's like, now it's here. It's just an amazing thing. No one was, Waggle is just a gimmick. This isn't a gimmick. Like, this is,
but I mean, it wasn't a gimmick until it was.
No, but to me, here's where I disagree with you on that though, Tim, is that to me, the second I saw the Wiimote, it was a gimmick. And as soon as I saw that you could not put a traditionally designed game on that controller because it didn't have enough buttons and other functions, I was like, I don't care about this. I'm not interested. All this can ever be is this gimmicky thing. And if that gimmicky thing is strong enough to hinge an entire game on, then great. I guess that'll be one good game. And if it's not, well, then this whole thing is going to fall apart. The strength to me that has been undersold in the way that VR is put forth to the public, because you're right, so much of it, to convince the average person out there who's not necessarily a huge gamer, you do need those experiences, right? So there's been a focus on that. So I think this next point that I'm about to make gets lost a little bit. But it's kind of similar to the point I made before, is that VR does not replace a controller. VR is, I hold a controller in my hand, a traditional real controller that is designed to adhere to the currently running design paradigms of video games. And on top of this, enhancing this, is an extra degree of freedom, control, and interaction. To me, it's less like introducing Waggle and having Waggle replace analog sticks, or having Waggle replace all these buttons, which is what Nintendo tried to do with the Wiimote. And it's more like the first time I used an analog stick and went, this adds a whole other when the first time I messed around with the N64 controller, I was like, I can do things I materially could not do before. Like, I can have Mario move in little tiptoes. I can have him move at like kind of like a walk, a jaunt, a full run, and it's all with the subtlety of my thumb. Like, to me, growing up, I was like, that blew my mind wide open in a Toys R Us the first time that I experienced that. And that's what I had when I played Hawken, which now isn't really, like on Oculus, the mech combat game. When I played Hawken and I could have my guns trained on a guy on my left, I could be strafing right, and I could also be looking over my left shoulder to see if there was anyone on my flank. I was like, I never want to play a game like this where I can't do that ever again. Just like I felt the first time I could move Mario with that fine degree of control, I was like, I never want to play a game where I can't move my character with that final level of control again. So I actually think for traditional gaming, as long as it's in a genre that, like I said before, works properly with it, or as long as they can find ways to adapt other genres like third-person shooters and first-person shooters properly to that concept, it doesn't have to replace it or become a gimmick. It literally just becomes another layer on top of it that makes it more nuanced, in the same way that adding analog controls made video game design and the experience of playing video games more nuanced over digital ones.
Yeah, very well put.
Yeah. I mean, to me, I still go back to it. It's not just waggle. It's the pointing thing did the exact same thing, and people just didn't like it. So
I just think, it's just going to take vision. And I think it's already obvious where this is going. Like it's going to be a slow burn, because it is one of those things where you can't, we always talk about November and December 2006 were so seminal for Wii, because that's when everyone put it in their bags and brought it home from college or brought it home to their parents and showed them, like, hey, everyone look, and grandma can play Wii bowling and everyone can see. This is going to be even more complicated, because you can put your PS4 and your VR in your bag and bring it home, but then only one person can see and you look like a doofus when you're playing it. So it's going to be this slow burn, but I'm telling you, this is going to be a wildfire. It might not be in 5 years, it might not even be in 10 years, but this isn't going anywhere.
But neither's whatever. It doesn't matter. The motion's not going anywhere either. You need that to have that immersive experience, or everything is Tron-like controllers in front of you because they're playing in a controller in the VR world. I remember everyone's talking about, I can't wait for a first-person shooter when you can actually, you move the analog and you're using the pointer to shoot, and it is the motion controls for that. And it's like, then we got Red Steel.
We sure did.
It was almost cool. But
we sure did get Red Steel, didn't we?
So I don't know. We'll see how that all goes.